and operating immediately. Thank you, everybody. What a crowd, what a turnout. I will tell you, this is historic. It's epic what happened. But you know what? It happened in Texas, and Texas can handle anything.
Good morning and welcome to AM Joy. Today, Donald Trump will give it another go, returning for a second visit to southeastern Texas, where entire neighborhoods remain underwater. Tens of thousands of residents are still in emergency shelters, and rescue crews are still looking for survivors. Now, you'll recall that Trump's first visit was something of a bust. He went to a part of the state that wasn't flooded and held an impromptu rally where he bragged about the size of his crowd, touted the FEMA chief's level of TV fame, and seemingly even marveled at the magnitude of the storm, while stopping just shy of congratulating himself and Texas officials on doing a heck of a job. He also failed to mention the people who died in the storm. That would be at least 41 people, and that number might still rise, or the tens of thousands of people displaced from their homes. But maybe today's visit will be different. Trump has already tried to do something that hasn't seemed to come naturally to him, namely expressing some empathy. He pledged $1 million of his alleged multi-billion-dollar fortune to Harvey relief efforts. Now, we've heard pledges of charitable donations from Trump in the past that never actually materialized. For those keeping track, Trump offered a $5 million donation to charity in 2012 if President Barack Obama coughed up proof that he was born in the United States. His $1 million pledge is also dwarfed by the efforts of celebrities like Beyonce and J.J. Watt, who have launched their own fundraising campaigns, with Watt raising $16 million and counting. Tragic events and disasters can wind up being defining leadership moments for presidents or defining failures. The question for Trump is whether it's too late to change the impression that he's made so far, or whether he even wants to. Joining me now, MSNBC contributor Gabe Sherman, Karine Jean-Pierre, senior advisor at MoveOn.org, David Frum, senior editor at The Atlantic, and National Republican consultant Caden Dawson. Thank you all for being here. And Gabe, you're at the table, so I will start with you first. Donald Trump sort of treated his first trip as a TV show. What can we expect from him today, in your estimation, since he is a guy who tends to see these things as showbiz?
Oh, without question. I mean, we're going to see more of the same. I mean, this is a desperate effort by this White House to come up with a new storyline, because the story that Donald Trump doesn't want the world focused on is the Robert Mueller investigation, which we know from new reporting this week that is moving ahead at rapid fire speed. He's teamed up with New York State Attorney General Eric Schneiderman. I mean, this is a perilous time for this president. So having any kind of visual or optics where he's in Texas is his effort to turn that corner. Yeah,
and Karine, you know, the president's son, Eric Trump, was out with a tweet sort of, you know, going after the media in advance, saying they're not going to tout the generosity of my dad, that he's giving $1 million of his own money. Well, here was Sarah Huckabee Sanders talking about the $1 million pledge, we should say, to Hurricane Harvey victims. Take a listen.
And he's pledging $1 million of personal money to the fund, and he's actually asked that I check with the folks in this room, since you are very good at research and have been doing a lot of reporting into the groups and organizations that are best and most effective in helping and providing aid, and he'd love some suggestions from the folks here.
So, Karine, asking the press to tell them where to donate, Sarah Huckabee Sanders also would not make clear that this money was going to come from Donald Trump's own personal funds. She seemed unable to verify whether this was going to come from his personal funds. And David Fahrenthold, the Pulitzer Prize-winning Washington Post reporter, has pointed out that the funds cannot come from his foundation, Donald Trump's foundation, because it's under investigation by the state of New York. What do you make of the whole charitable donations angle here?
You can't believe anything he has to say, Joy. Anything that comes out of Trump's mouth, normally 99% of the time, is a lie. And you made this point earlier. Back in 2011, he offered $5 million for a racist hoax, but the Gulf Coast and Texas and Louisiana gets $1 million. So, I mean, look, this is a man who, back in 2016, he skipped a debate and went to Iowa to do a fundraiser for veterans and claimed to have raised $6 million. And it wasn't until the Washington Post called him out on, hey, what happened to the money, that he actually gave money, right? Before then, he wasn't going to give a cent. So you can't really believe anything he has to say. His foundation is under investigation. He's never kept any real promises when it comes to charity. And this is the person that we're dealing with. Today is another photo op. He treats everything like a reality TV show. But let's be really clear here. Harvey is really real. It's real for many people, millions of people who are suffering and people who have died.
And Kaiten, you know, I mean, obviously people who like Donald Trump already think that everything he does is fine, right? I wonder what people who are Trump supporters make of the fact that one of the things that Donald Trump did when he went down the first time was to market hats, to sell the hat that he was wearing when he went down, the hat with the USA and the 45 on it. They're $40 a pop. You can buy them on the Trump Reelect website. And it was actually promoted that Trump fans can, quote, buy the look. Is that even too unseemly for Trump supporters?
I'm not sure they connect the dot between the storm and the hats. What I've found is that people who don't like Donald Trump don't like him, and that's not going to change. And I found the people that do like him filter out the messages they want to hear from Donald Trump. I have polling evidence that shows that. His base is fairly solid. He's in the mid to late 30s. And as far as storms are concerned, they're political pitfalls and political opportunities. My house was flooded in 2015. I rode by 22 houses on the way to the studio today that still are boarded up and hadn't been fixed. Nobody blamed President Obama on that not being fixed, and I doubt Trump didn't have the visual like George Bush had of looking out over Air Force One and not going down and visiting the people. He doesn't have that optic yet, and I think he's going back to make a statement of the support for the people of Texas and the politicians in Texas. But it is a horrific tragedy that's happened down there. People who, like myself and others who have been affected by hurricanes and floods, get that this is 10 years in the making down there of getting it fixed. I think Donald Trump will come and he'll go, and then there'll be the argument, much like there was in Sandy, of the funding, the appropriations, what's going to do with the insurance companies. This is a really big tragedy, and Donald Trump's got to be very, very careful with his tone and messages today.
Well, I mean, and careful, David, from doing it a second time. I mean, you know, these kind of events can become defining. You know, the response to Hurricane Katrina became defining for George W. Bush, and not in a good way. For Donald Trump to go a second time, particularly after he's already sent his vice president to kind of do his act, right, to do what the president would normally do. This is Mike Pence, and I believe this was on Thursday in Rockport, Texas. Take a listen.
We are with you. The American people are with you. We are here today, we will be here tomorrow, and we will be here every day until this city and this state and this region rebuild bigger and better than ever before. It's a long way to go. It's not months, but it's years. The challenges will be great, but we know that the generosity and the prayers and the faith of the people of Texas and the American people will be greater still.
Yeah, and you know, David, there are a lot of people who are not fans of Mike Pence, but that is sort of what you expect a president to say. It's already been said by his vice president, and as you sort of give us your thoughts, I want to show the audience Donald Trump still's got the hat. He's still got the hat for sale this morning as he's heading off to Air Force One. There he is. He's heading off to go. His hat's in his hand. You can see it there in his hand. He's got one of his MAGA hats. What do you make of this whole kind of the optics of this, David?
Well, Vice President Pence tipped the cards a little bit to say something or to indicate something that professional politicians all know, but that they don't usually talk about with the cameras on, which is that the reconstruction from a disaster is a giant political opportunity. Suddenly, there are billions or tens of billions or more of federal dollars to be allocated, usually by local politicians. You, as the Vice President said, you build bigger and better. Where there is a park, there is now a park and a bike path. Where there is a park and a bike path, there are now bathrooms. And you create, and every one of those things can be delivered by your local members of Congress, your local state senators, senators and state assembly people. So it is a dramatic political opportunity. That's one of the reasons why there's been a tendency often to put political people at FEMA rather than disaster professionals. The disaster professionals are, indispensable when the disaster strikes, but they may not be sensitive to political needs during the reconstruction. So whatever happens with these videos today, understand this is going to be a major political undertaking for the Trump administration and the Texas Republican Party to flow a lot of money into the state. And to shore up in advance of 2018 any parts of the Texas political universe that are looking weak or dodgy for the president.
Yeah, Kate and Dawson, I'm coming right to you on that. $14.5 billion already been requested, and the White House is calling that a down payment. We've seen the spectacle on cable news of a lot of Republicans who thought Hurricane Sandy aid was a boondoggle, that it shouldn't be allocated without pay-fors, suddenly saying, what do you mean pay-fors? We want the money. And isn't David Frum exactly right? This is an opportunity for Republicans to completely reverse everything they've ever said about appropriations and take all the money and use it for politics.
Well, I'm from South Carolina that's had Hurricane Hugo that's tore up our state, floods. Let me explain to you. The money that's going to flow into Houston and Texas is going to be astronomical. Now, the appropriation process and what happened at Sandy and the Ted Cruz episode not voting for that by appropriations, that's a whole nother conversation. But you got to watch it. When you have federal dollars that are going to be appropriated, watch the bad actors that are going to show up and try to attach amendments to it and get anything where even the wind blew close to their state to get appropriated money. That's the process we'll watch in the next couple of months. But right now, I think it's all hands on deck. With Mike Pence was former Governor Rick Perry, who handled 3 of those type events. Nikki Haley is in the administration, so the president's got a lot of fresh advice on how to handle this politically. And the Congress, I give them a warning that they better be very responsible and careful, along with the insurance companies that are going to start showing up and taking care of these people, no matter who they are or where they live in Texas. They need help.
Gabe, Donald Trump took some money off after 9/11, right? He managed to gobble up some of that federal money as well, so he's got some personal experience with this. I imagine that the conservative media that is stumping for Trump, really no matter what he does, are also going to change their minds about their feelings about federal allocations, and are going to be using this opportunity to highlight Republicans repairing Texas.
Yeah, I think we'll see that. And I think one thing that I was struck by this week is that there was actually some pockets of resistance in the conservative media to Trump's handling of the hurricane. We saw him tweet at Fox and Friends this week responding to Laura Ingraham, who said that, part of the problem is Trump has not filled these federal positions. There's left open vacancies in FEMA and other agencies, and that part of the response has been hobbled by this lack of staffing. And, we saw him respond to that. So I think it was striking to me that, Fox and Friends, which is the de facto mouthpiece for this White House, even they were disappointed in Trump's handling of the crisis.
Yeah, and Karine, I wonder if it's going to scramble just a little bit of the ideology, because you do have those Freedom Caucus folks who they don't like spending money no matter what, right? And I wonder if you may see the beginnings of some rifts when it comes to, the down payment of $14.5 billion, even though the money is clearly needed.
That's a really good point, Joey. Look, let's not forget, back at CPAC, Steve Bannon laid out the ethos, the philosophy, the goal of the Trump administration, which was the deconstruction of administrative state. That's the goal that they were moving forward with. That's why Donald Trump presented a budget that slashed funding and programs from FEMA, from the Department of Homeland Security, from SBA, Small Business Administration, which are going to be leading this effort. So this is not about just today, a short-term thing. This is a long-term process. And also the staffing, as that was just mentioned. Thousands of positions have not been staffed in these agencies, these political positions that are really important. Civil servants are doing a great job, but you need the politicos in these positions. I started off in the Obama administration as a politico in the Department of Labor. You need those positions. And so it starts from the top. It starts from Donald Trump. It's not just a Republican Party. Let's hope that the Republicans Republicans on the Hill do not make this a political thing like they did when President Obama was asking for a disaster relief fund. But it's also with Donald Trump. He has not created a government that is going to take care of these people that really, truly need it.
You know, David, it just strikes me that almost everything about the Trump presidency and the fact that you have Republicans in full control of the federal government does create all of these sort of weird stress points for things that we've believed about conservatism, right? Whether or not conservatives believe that the federal government is there to help, or in the Ronald Reagan sort of parlance, is there to hurt, whether or not these big appropriations are the right thing to do when people need help. Even things like deregulation. You now have the Arkema plant, chemical sort of explosions into the air, and people aren't even allowed to know what's in the chemicals, what is in the toxic smoke. So are conservatives going to have a reckoning here, or are people just going to, you know, paper over it and just go ahead and spend the money because of the need?
Look, I think the lesson of the Trump era and the lesson of the Trump campaign has been that conservative ideology, it's over. That was a different chapter of American history. I mean, it exists as kind of rusty weapons in the arsenal to be used when you need a weapon. But it's like the ideas of the Whigs. It's like the ideas of, you know, social democrats. I mean, there are no real social. There's no one who believes in national state planning anymore. And a lot of the conservative ideology that was so strong between 1975 and the early part of the 21st century, it's really over. When there was an argument over the allocation of funds for Hurricane Sandy, people used conservative arguments. But what the argument was really about was, did you want to put, in advance of the 2014 elections, a big chunk of disposable cash into the hands of the Democratic Party to use in the mouth of the Hudson area? And so that was about turning off potential patronage funds for a Democratic administration going into a Republican congressional year. And what is the argument about the hurricane in Texas, although it will be couched in ideological terms, it really is about putting patronage money into the hands of the federal government for a red state going into a tough Republican year.
Yeah. Spoken very honestly, and that's why we love having you on. Gabe Sherman, Karine Jean-Pierre, David Frum, Kate and Dawson, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And up next, Trump's connection with Russia is coming into focus. Stay with us. Touted the FEMA chief's level of TV fame and seemingly even marveled at the magnitude of the storm, while stopping just shy of congratulating himself and Texas officials on doing a heck of a job. He also failed to mention the people who died in the storm. That would be at least 41 people, and that number might still rise, or the tens of thousands of people displaced from their homes. Today, Donald Trump will give it another go, returning for a second visit to southeastern Texas, where entire neighborhoods remain underwater. Tens of thousands of residents are still in emergency shelters, and rescue crews are still looking for survivors. Now, you'll recall that Trump's first visit was something of a bust. He went to a part of the state that wasn't flooded and held an impromptu rally where he bragged about the size of his crowd, if President Barack Obama coughed up proof that he was born in the United States. His $1 million pledge is also dwarfed by the efforts of celebrities like Beyonce and J.J. Watt, who have launched their own fundraising campaigns, with Watt raising $16 million and counting. Tragic events and disasters can wind up being defining leadership moments for presidents, or defining failures.
We get you back and operating immediately. Thank you, everybody. What a crowd, what a turnout. I will tell you, this is historic. It's epic what happened. But you know what? It happened in Texas, and Texas can handle anything.
Good morning and welcome to AM Joy. But maybe today's visit will be different. Trump has already tried to do something that hasn't seemed to come naturally to him, namely expressing some empathy. He pledged $1 million of his alleged multi-billion-dollar fortune to Harvey relief efforts. Now, we've heard pledges of charitable donations from Trump in the past that never actually materialized. For those keeping track, Trump offered a $5 million donation to charity in 2012.